Welcome back to Clash of Cultures as we continue our 2023 college football recap series. Today, we're going to be talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, back-to-back champions who lost to Alabama in the SEC championship. But if you made it this far, please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you continue to get notified about upcoming videos as we continue our recap series. We're going to do about 50 videos altogether. So tune in with us, rock with us as we talk about and recap the 2023 college football season. With that being said, Steven, what's your thoughts on the 2023 Georgia Bulldogs?
So obviously this team, this program really has been somewhat the standard of the 2020s, I will say. For sure. Obviously going back to back and then trying to three-peat. Kind of in a weird situation this year, obviously finishing the regular season undefeated. They were kind of a shoe-in to get in. And then we know, obviously, they lost by 3 against Alabama late in the year. And then the whole, Florida State, Alabama, Texas ordeal. And Georgia really was kind of left out of the conversation, which I thought was a little weird, especially being back-to-back champions, pretty much bringing back a whole new team outside of, Brock Bowers, Kendall Milton, a few of those guys, but you lost, obviously, Stetson Bennett. And then throughout those 2 championship runs, having that entire defense, pretty much that entire defense going to the NFL. A lot of those players on the Eagles, obviously, that's kind of a joke they like to say. But I think it's kind of odd that they weren't even in discussion at the end of the year when, I think they should have been. I know they lost a game, but Alabama and Texas both lost a game as well. And they ended up leaving a Power 5 undefeated team out as it is. We saw how that game went. Obviously, we'll talk about that later in the video. But I think not only was this season still a success, even though they didn't win a championship, I think they're still the standard in college football. I think Kirby Smart is still a very good head football coach, obviously a top 2 to 3 coach in college football. I'm pretty sure he and Dabo maybe are tied for the second most championships of all active head coaches. I know Nick Saban obviously is number 1.
I think they're the only people right now with 2. Yes. I'm fairly certain.
So obviously he's kind of, growing into himself, post 2021 and on, and kind of put his team in position to not only get the best recruits, but to kind of compete for a national championship every single year. So to me, in my opinion, like I said, Michigan was the most complete team, but Georgia was a close second behind them, especially as you saw throughout the year. They had a couple of hiccups early in the year. We saw the first half woes, I guess you'd say. In a lot of these games, we saw them down to South Carolina, I believe, by 10 points at halftime or so, maybe 8 points, fought back and won that game. But pretty much after kind of the halfway point in the season, looked pretty much dominant, won by at least 3 possessions in everything but 2 wins post, week 4 or week 5. And then obviously the loss late kind of was their detriment in not letting them get to the championship game or the playoff at all. But I still think, in my opinion, this was a top 4 team, and I think they should have got in over in Alabama and over at Texas, in my opinion. Obviously, Alabama had the head-to-head win, so they had to kind of favor that, and that's why Texas got in over Alabama. But I truly think that Georgia was a top 4 team this year. They're losing a lot heading into next year, but before we kind of get into that, what was your takeaway for their season?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said really, I go along with those same sentiments. Kirby Smart has the makings of what looks like a long run / dynasty that he's building here at Georgia. We've seen the turnover, and they continue to play impressive football. We like you mentioned, they have lost a bunch of players, but they continue to play impressive football. 12-1 losing to Alabama in the SEC championship is nothing to be upset about. Now, I'm sure by the Georgia standard at this point, like you mentioned in the 2020s, this can be seen as a disappointing season coming off back-to-back championships without the ability to play for your 3rd in a row. But if you look at the history of Georgia, this kind of 3, 4, 5-year run where they have been a championship contender year in and year out, their name has been on whatever, the story of the season. Kirby Smart has these guys humming. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of turnover, but they're bringing back a number of players. And let me say this, I've doubted them the last 2 seasons. And again, 12-1, and obviously they're not going to win the national championship this year. But I will not doubt Kirby Smart and his ability to retool this team and have them fighting for a championship again. Whether or not they're there, I guess we'll see. There's probably still a lot to be determined. especially in this era of transfer portal and who teams bring in and who Georgia brings in. But I will no longer doubt Kirby Smart and his ability to retool this team to a championship level and have them ready to play. And like you mentioned, most of this year they played at the championship level. They were number one for a good portion of the year. I know Ohio State was number one early playoff polls. In the AP, I think they were dang near at number one the entire season. But in the early playoff polls, Ohio State was number one. They were number two, and then they jumped Ohio State. And then they were number one really up until the SEC championship game. It's tough to lose what could have been, like I said, 3 championships in a row in a 3-point game in a neutral site. But, they didn't win a conference championship in a season where we had a number of teams that had either better or the same record that did have conference championships. So just unfortunate loss at the wrong time. If they lose that game the first week of the season, maybe we're talking about a different story, because then they do win and they do go on to win the SEC championship, maybe a different story. But it was tough this year. This was one of the most competitive years. Again, the one year that we left out a Power 5 undefeated conference champion. So this was one of the most competitive years in terms of getting those 4 teams in. So they just didn't make the cut this year. And while I don't like it for them, like you mentioned, I will agree that they were a top 4 team in terms of talent, in terms of product on the field. I believe it was the right call to leave them out based on the criteria of this season.
I agree. Just based on having all of those undefeated or having, the 3 undefeated Power 5 champions, and then having a 12-1 conference champion who beat you. That's already 4 teams right there. Not to mention, anybody else who could have had that argument, like a Ohio State. So it's kind of hard when you think about it that way. Obviously, Ohio State lost to Missouri later, which we'll talk about. But I'm saying after the regular season, they were 12-1 or 11-1. So it's kind of hard to put them in over the top 4. But I do think, like I said, if we would have saw Georgia in the playoffs, they would have probably, if I'm not mistaken, I saw a post that if Georgia and Michigan were to be playing in the national championship, Georgia would be a 2-point favorite.
That's crazy.
So it's kind of crazy that the odds makers are saying that a team that didn't even make the playoffs will be a favorite, which is, nuts. But really excited for the 12 team, obviously, to kind of erase some of that kind of questions and concerns, because I don't think that you could tell me a team who is the 15th ranked team in the country would be a favorite against the number 1 team in the country at the end of the year. Like the situation we're seeing now with Georgia and Michigan, the projected odds. So I do like that there's going to be a 12 team. But like I said, they are losing a little bit heading into next year. I know they're losing. I'm sorry, pull it back up. I know they're losing Kendall Milton. They're losing Dejon Edwards, who's their lead back. So obviously they recruit really well, probably better than anybody in the country. I mean, them in Alabama have really had the top 2 classes over the last couple of years.
And as you mentioned, them losing that, obviously Carson Beck is coming back, and they are bringing in Trevor Etienne from I can't remember those Etiennes, but from Florida. So they're losing 2 very good backs. They're bringing in a back that was in the 2 deep at Florida that's supposed to be and should be behind this Georgia team, a power. And, I suspect that he's going to have a really good season.
They're also losing Brock Bowers. They're losing Ladd McConkey. So both of their, I would say, 2 main pass catchers. Obviously, Ladd McConkey was the number 4 in receiving yards, but I still think he was a staple in their offense. So losing him, and obviously losing the best tight end in America, with him being gone, that's going to be a hit. I'm not sure if Dominic Lovett announced he's coming back, or Rosemary Jack Saint. I'm not sure. They're both draft eligible, but neither of them I don't think have made an announcement yet. Georgia fans in the comment section, let me know if I'm wrong, if they've announced that they're leaving or if they're coming back. But like I said, they're obviously one of the best recruiting teams in all of college football. So I have no doubt that they won't be right back in the thick of things next year. Obviously, they play my Clemson Tigers in Atlanta week 1 next year. So I'm very excited to see that game.
We should go.
Yeah, I don't want to go see my team lose. I'm not going to fly across the country to see my team lose. I'm okay. But I hope we win, but I'm not about to fly across the country to see us lose in week 1. I'm going to be pissed. But yeah, I think, like I said, Georgia had a successful season. And I would say, if Georgia fans would say, we should have been in, I'm not going to disagree, because I agree. and on that statement that you guys were a top 4 team, but based on the criteria, and I think of the last 9 years, it's been the most deserving. So you can't, have your cake and eat it too. At the same time, there's other teams that have been in the situation that didn't get in, who we could have had the same conversation for. Yes, you guys are back-to-back champions. You guys really can't take that for granted because that's only been done a handful of times. And I think, like I said, you guys are, in my opinion, they're in the middle of a dynasty. And now I know certain people would say it's not a dynasty until you win 3, or I think that is more of a NFL kind of thing and a NBA kind of thing. But in college football, it's a lot harder because only a specific number of teams can even make it to the title to begin with.
Yeah, and then when you play that out, right? And this is why I say a dynasty. You remember they played Alabama in the championship where Tua throws the pass to Devontae Smith to win the game. So that's another championship they played in. Again, they had a championship-like season this year. Like I said, didn't make it, obviously, but they were in the hunt for the entire season up into conference championship week. So they have been in that hunt, in that top 3-4 teams for really, you could probably go back the last 5-6 years.
5 years. Yeah, 5 years for sure.
And say they've been in that hunt. And in that period, they've had 2 national championships. So yeah, maybe not the same as the run of Alabama. Maybe we're in the infancy. I think to really put this up with some of the great dynasties, they may need another championship or 2. But I believe they have the makings of what could be a dynasty.
No, for sure. And I think, like I said, Kirby Smart has gotten to a position where he's proven that he can win. We saw this year, there were so many question marks surrounding his team with the amount of losses they have with Stetson Bennett. And he took a less experienced quarterback. And although they didn't make the playoffs, they were damn near close, right there. So I think obviously losing Dylan Raiola was going to be a bit of a hit for them, in the future. But I don't have a doubt in my mind that they won't get another, star quarterback at some point in the next year or 2. Obviously, Beck's coming back next year, so it's not something they have to really worry about right now. But definitely interested to see how they kind of round out next year and the year after that to see if, what we said about the dynasty kind of comes true. But right now, they're the hottest team in college football. I think Kirby Smart is the hottest coach in college football. Obviously, Nick Saban is still up there, but Kirby Smart has 2 championships, after this year. 2 of the last 3 championships will be residing in Georgia. So you kind of have to give them that crown as of right now. But very excited to see what you guys think in the comment section. Let us know what other teams you guys want us to recap as well. We're going to continue doing this recap series for you guys. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss an upload. We will see you guys tomorrow when we do our Alabama Crimson Tide recap. So we'll see you guys then. Peace out.